And welcome everyone to another episode of Top Men in Indiana Jones podcast. I am one of the top men, Elliot Serrano. You may know me from other podcasts such as Shaken Not Heard and the MCU Review. The MCU Review being the host channel for Top Men. So if you're following us on the YouTube page, you're watching us on the MCU Review page. You're also watching us on the Top Men and Indiana Jones podcast Facebook. So if you want to see all episodes of Top Men, well, so far there's only been 2, including this one, and the MCU Review, check out our Facebook pages as well as the YouTube page. So let's pull in the rest of the crew in addition to our top guest. First off, he is the founder, the creator, the proprietor of Caffeinated Comics, the host of Top Men on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network, John Clark.
How you doing, Elliot?
I think I'm doing better than you for once.
Well, I'm feeling dark and conflicted, which is the perfect time to talk about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
I get that. Yes, this is gonna be a dark ride. If you turned in last week for the MCU Review when we talked about Ant-Man and the Wasp, John was in the middle of a move, and let's just say he's still in the middle of a move.
Okay. You don't know how many times I've done tilt adjustment on a flat screen TV.
No bueno.
No bueno.
All right. And our next panelist is my co-host on the Shaken Not Heard James Bond podcast, the show that gave birth to both the MCU Review and Top Men, because we kept saying during our talk about James Bond that we had talk about Indiana Jones. Dave Pinnell. How you doing, Dave?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing great. John, not so much, but we all have those days.
I used it though.
You used good.
I used it to make jokes no one wants to hear.
Well, it's like Dave is like Jerry Seinfeld in this particular equation.
I know where you're going with this, and that's going to make you Kramer.
Well, he's Jerry. I'm Kramer. I'm up. You're George, and you're a bit down right now. So
what you're saying, it's time to bring in Elaine.
It's time to bring in Elaine.
Yeah.
Speaking of our eye candy, why, yes, he is also our resident mixologist and the one who creates all the custom drinks for the MCU Review and for Top Man, Thomas Jetner.
Evening, guys.
Good evening, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Things are a little busy around the house, but other than that, everyone's doing okay.
All right. I'm glad to hear that. We're taking the level here, the temperature of everybody in the room. You're cool. For those of you who are watching on the live stream, you can see that Tom and Dave have the custom drink for tonight's show. We'll be talking about that. Good evening, Susan. Good evening, Lehman. Good evening, everyone who is watching us on the Facebook and YouTube live stream. Again, if you are watching us on the live stream, feel free to comment. Drop a comment. We do respond to everything. We try to respond to everything in real time as we go through our conversations here. If you are listening to this show as part of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network, thank you so much for tuning in. And I think this one's going to be a great one. I say, hold on to your potatoes because we have a very special guest. I have known this gentleman for some time, and I'm going to tell you, there's nothing he loves more than to give me serious Indiana Jones envy. He's a PR professional. He is formerly of Lucasfilm and Disney. Let's just say, he also has probably one of the greatest dogs in the world named Walter. John Singh. John, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hello. Hi. Thank you.
Well, No, thank you, because again, you, my friend.
There's another thing I like to talk to you about, Elliot, and
Yes.
he's right over here. So, which
Yes.
is Elliot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because well, John, when John and I first started, communicating with each other, of course, I was Pete's dragon in every case. Anyone named Elliot is Pete's dragon. So I'll go with it. I'll take it. It's good. It's better than the alternatives.
It's a very good thing. Yeah. Hey, how are you guys? Are you ready to talk about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom?
Now, for those who might not be aware, again, John loves to tease me with kind of his experience with these movies, and your own experience. This is something that he sent me right before we went on air. Just about 40 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And now, John, are those replica toys that you're posing?
Those are not replica toys. Those are actually that's when I worked at Lucasfilm. One of the projects that I worked on was bringing the Jeopardy crew to the Lucasfilm archives, and the archives is one of those places that in theory that you can go there when you work at Lucasfilm, but it just doesn't seem like the place that you should ever set foot in. So I got to spend basically 2 whole days there just playing around, and whenever we saw something, they would just tell us, yeah, you can pick that up, yeah, you can touch that, except for the Death Star, the uncompleted Death Star from Return of the Jedi. That was stay away, don't even breathe on this thing because it's gonna fall apart. But those are the real Shankara stones. Yeah.
And the crate from the
crate, yeah,
Ark. Oh.
And then I got to peer inside the actual Ark of the Covenant. So.
And your face didn't melt off.
It's really, really good plastic surgery. Yeah.
So really incredible envy with John, because you've actually been able to be a part of that world. We're going to have you back when we talk about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because you were involved also promoting that film too, right?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
I loved it. Okay, you don't have to apologize to me. Like I've loved all the Indiana Jones movies, warts and all. And again, you're not going to see any Indy hate coming from this guy here. I love them all pretty much. So
I love them all pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
I love all my kids equally, kinda. Yeah.
Look, as the firstborn, I know that the firstborn's always the favorite. So come on, let's be real here. So, anywho, so what we're going to do is, of course, today we're going to talk about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. We've invited John to join us. You say Temple is your favorite of the series?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, definitely want to hear about that. So what we're going to do is we're going to lead off with our 2-minute Indy dive in. So essentially, give you 2 minutes to give us your perspective, a quick review of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Normally what we do is we re-watch the film before coming on air. If you have not had a chance to re-watch the film before coming on air, at least giving your 2-minute review of the film. And since you, John, are our special guest and it is your favorite film, in 2 minutes, tell us what you loved about this film.
I love that it plays on the idea that of everything we know about Indiana Jones from Raiders of the Lost Ark, that they've set up the idea that Indiana Jones is this very human but clearly invincible kind of guy, and that I think on a meta level, we know we're watching a movie. So I think what I love most about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is the way that they played with the idea that we're just going to throw him into the most unlikely, most ridiculous of scenarios and let him figure his way out. You know nothing will ever happen to him. You know that is impossible. So the joy is watching them create these kinds of, Rube Goldberg style contraptions and situations that seem impossible to get out of, and it's just pure fun. That's the thing I love most about it. And then on a bigger level for me is the idea that I first saw it, and it came out when I was probably at the most impressionable age for something like this. It's hard for me to decide whether I love Temple of Doom most because I think it's the best Indiana Jones film, or because it's the Indiana Jones film that came out at the best time for me.
Can you go a little bit more into that?
Yes. Oh, right now.
Yes.
No, I think that, for me, look, now you're going to just make me go ahead and say it, that I was a senior in high school when it came out, and I worked at a big single. In fact, you asked me to pull some show and tell stuff, and one of the things I pulled out was not from Lucasfilm, but was this ad from 1984 when it actually was came out in San Diego, where I grew up, and got to work at the movie theater where it was playing, and it was such a kind of movie event that we don't get anymore. This anticipation that it was coming was huge. And so I don't know whether the movie itself is what I respond to, or whether it's the triggers of that time that I respond to, or a little bit of both. But I do remember one of the most fun things that I remember about that movie is when we first saw it, that very first show, and it opens with that musical number, and it from that point on, I mean, literally the song is Anything Goes, and that's the tone of the movie. And I think that's what is so wonderful about it. It's just joyous, despite the fact that it's dark. It's just so much fun.
So, John, I appreciate that. I said you had 2 minutes, and then you were respectful of the 2 minutes, and then I made you go further. So I see what you were doing here. So I appreciate that. All right, Dave Pino.
This is a movie like, the other Indy movies, as you know, Elliot, I'm not as huge of an Indiana Jones fan, but I think I'm becoming more of one because of this show. I've seen it a couple of times in my life, not, a ton, but every couple of years there'll be an Indy marathon or something, and it'll give me a reason to watch this. And it's just a fun movie. I know one of the criticisms, or, depending on where you're coming from, compliments it's received is it's dark, noticeably darker than Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I kind of like that about it. There's this sort of almost mean-spirited feel to it that, while it's still very much an Indiana Jones movie, it still has tons of moments of levity, and it's fun and raucous and everything you expect from an Indy movie. And Ellie, I'm going to bring this up. That whole opening sequence, to me, it just screams James Bond, and that's one of the reasons I love this one so much. It feels like, with Raiders, there's a little bit more of a build-up to sort of introducing Indiana Jones to the audience, since it's our first encounter with him. But in this one, even though it's technically a prequel, it just basically jumps right into the action. There's no big build-up. We know who Indy is at this point. There's no need to waste a bunch of time with exposition and everything, and reintroducing him to the audience, so that that opening where you see the Paramount logo, and then you basically jump right into the story, into the adventure. To me, it feels like a Bond movie, like a pre-title sequence to a Bond film. It's almost like this little self-contained adventure. And then, of course, you have Harrison Ford dressed almost exactly like Sean Connery in Goldfinger. And yeah, it's a fun movie. I always forget. I mentioned when I was messaging you guys a couple days ago, I always forget that Dan Aykroyd randomly shows up in this movie, which I love. And there's a million things we can get into the individual, subtopics as we go on. But I really enjoy this one.
I will say that I remember when I first saw Indy, Temple of Doom, and Harrison Ford shows up in that tuxedo. I did not think James Bond. I thought Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca. So I thought they were doing a Bogart. As many people, they've referred to Harrison Ford as a modern day Humphrey Bogart. So, but of course, after Shaken Not Heard, I was like, holy crap, the Red Carnation. That's Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be equal parts of both.
Keep going, John.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, sure.
I think that suit he wears in the club, Obi-Wan, is supposed to evoke both Sean Connery's Bond and Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca, because this Indiana Jones is a lot rougher around the edges. And I think as you look at it, you can see it as a prequel, but originally they just said it earlier so audiences wouldn't wait for Karen Allen. Which Spielberg says, like, people would have been distracted going like, we love Marion. Where's Marion? What happened to Marion? So they were just like, just change the year. But Indy's a different person than he is in Raiders. He's certainly harder edged. And I think his arc softens him enough where he's the guy he is in Raiders. But there's, it's not just, I mean, we can talk about this being dark for the whole show. And we can say, oh yeah, there's monkey brains, there's child enslavement. There is, I think the scariest moment in this whole thing is when Indy is taken over. When he's given the mind control drug. First of all, that scene of him, it's like the anti-Black Panther where he's in that like tomb but then also the scene where he attacks Short Round. Is there's no wink in that. And I mean, there's commitment to it, but it's like between John Williams' score, the lighting, and Harrison Ford's performance, you're in a point you've never been that low in Raiders. But then again, some of the heights of it are so much bigger. The minecart scene is so much more than the truck scene would have been. Just the whole chase for the diamond in the club. There's so much chaos in that. There's like more random elements happening in that than there are in the streets of Cairo. Everything's a little bigger. Harrison Ford's hat is a little bigger in this movie. Everything's just kind of heightened. Harrison Ford's the most ripped he ever is. In fact, he really screwed up his back making this movie, and they had to shoot a lot of the scenes with his double. But this movie is the perfect sequel, and it's like, let's do everything in that first movie, but do it more.
Definitely. Tom.
Well, this is my least favorite Indiana Jones movie. So I'm going to say right out front, this is my least favorite Indiana Jones movie. I had actually I made several attempts to try to get all the way through it. And finally, my wife and I had to do it together for me to kind of stay with it in terms of when I was trying to watch it. I think there are two pieces that kind of sum up this movie that really stuck out to me when I was watching it. One is that, because this is a very different movie from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Very, very different. I agree with Dave's assessment. This is much more like a James Bond movie. Like, kind of watching this, I get almost kind of like Live and Let Die feels, I think, at some point, some pieces of it. Yeah. But the opening musical number, they bring out the title card, and it's the only Indiana Jones film out of the three to have the title in the big orange and yellow splash. It's normally this kind of split Roman font. Dave would know if I just say Colorado Rockies. I think Dave would know what I was talking about.
Yep.
All the other title sequences are like that. And you have the big splashy kind of cartoony letters, and Willie is in front of the letters. So that struck me like, okay, so we're we're doing a real focus on this. And the other thing that I kind of pointed out is toward the end, you have Indy come up with the two guys with swords, and Indy reaches down for his gun and it's not there. So they set up that same bit that they had did in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he just pulls out the gun and shoots the swordsman. But now he can't shoot the swordsman because they've taken away his gun, and now it's two swordsmen instead of just one. So it is kind of doing a lot of the things they wanted to do in the first Indiana Jones movie, but more, or it's kind of like coming back. It's like, all right, let's do the scene where Indy has to fight a guy with a sword rather than just have him shoot him. It's the opening, I think, sequence from the scene at the night at the Club Obi-Wan through to the raft parachute is very exciting. And then we actually don't get a lot of action. We don't get a lot of action for then a significant chunk of the middle movie. And then we're on a roller coaster ride. We're on a theme park ride for the last 45 minutes or so. So I have multiple critiques of this movie. But it's very, very different. And if you were coming into this movie, I can't imagine what it was like. I was a little too young. I was too young to see it in the theaters, but coming out of probably Raiders of the Lost Ark and seeing this movie, you'd had to feel like you were watching almost an entirely different franchise.
I will say, and I saw this movie in the theater. I think John Singh and I were about the same age when this came out. I remember going to the local Sports Mart. That was the precursor to all the other sports stores at the time, and getting an advance ticket to seeing Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom at the Chicago Theater. This is back when the Chicago Theater still showed movies. Bought it at Ticketron. Ticketron being the precursor to what we know today as Ticketmaster and all the other ticket services. I remember going. And the gal at the counter said, "What are you?" She thought I was there to buy a concert ticket. I went, "No, I want to get one ticket. Yes, one ticket to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and I wanted to watch it in the early afternoon, not the first showing. I thought, because I was going to take the train downtown to see the movie. They don't want to get up too early. Get down, and I bought one ticket. That's sad, little Elliot, to see this film. And yes, and I saw it in a theater that was fairly full, not a packed evening showing, but enough people where every joke, every bit, every stunt hit. We all laughed at the same time. We all gasped at the same time. All the, it just, I think that was a big part of the experience too. The fact that it happened when it did. I saw it with the crowd that I did. Yes, it was a far cry from Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was much darker, but it's funny. Temple of Doom actually has more jokes and more humor in it than Raiders. Harrison Ford does a lot more of his comedic type stuff in Temple of Doom than he does in Raiders. And of course, we'll probably spend a lot of time talking about Ke Huy Quan, who, as Short Round, just freaking steals the show every time he's up. To me, I loved him then. Every time I watch this movie, again, I just finished watching it before we came on air. I was like, it's to me a wonderful, wonderful sequel. And it also shows one more thing. And this is one of those more annoying things that goes around about Indiana Jones. Is that meme that goes around that's saying, well, why don't we create a character like Indiana Jones, except he returns all the things that have been stolen to their point of origin? I'm like, did you even watch Temple of Doom? In Temple of Doom, he returns Nurhachi to China. Yes, it's a warlord, okay? Yes, I know it's a Chinese warlord, but he's bringing him back to China, and he's returning the Shankara stones to the village that it was stolen from. So, I'm getting tired of that bit there. All right. John Singh, I'm sorry, am I wrong here?
You're not never going to get any argument from me on anything, Elliot. But particularly in this case, and I think that I really appreciate what Tom is saying about his reaction to this film. And did you recently just watch it for the very first time, Tom?
No, I'd seen it a few times. Mostly I saw it when I was on TV when I was a kid, and then I saw it on the big screen at the Music Box when they were doing all three films back to back to back a number of years ago, and then I watched it. I think again for the very first time all the way through. But I remember just kind of like I'm trying to remember if it was. I'm trying to remember the sequence that I saw it at the Music Box, because I think I saw Temple of. I can't remember if I saw this one first, because I'm pretty sure I saw Raiders last. So I think maybe it was Last Crusade first, then Temple of Doom, and then Raiders. So it was quite a bit of a whiplash going from one to the other, because
Well, I find it really interesting what you said about even that opening shot, of Willie Scott coming out of the dragon and having the title appear behind her. Not only the title, but the kind of illustrated version of the title. And I mean, that was literally a wow. That was a gasping moment when you first saw it on the big screen, because this was before CG. So the ability to do that was like, that alone told you this is going to be a completely different film than you're expecting. And
it was between Willie and the backup dancer.
Yeah, right. She actually appears in front of it, and then but it's against the. Yes, exactly. But I think that's that signal that this is going to be entirely different than you expect is the moment that I have a feeling a lot of people kind of, I mean, literally right from the start, just kind of were lost on this film too, because it didn't open up with, Indiana Jones in the desert fighting Nazis. So,
well, none of the films open with Indiana Jones in the desert fighting Nazis. But I don't know if necessarily if the movie lost. I'm not going to say the movie lost me, because I think I got more into it as the movie then went going, because I do think the next series are very, very good. Aside from the geography of crossing the Great Wall of China while flying from Shanghai southwest across China, it does something. It kind of short circuited my brain while I was watching it. It's one of those like divide by zero moments where you're just like, you can't do but the subsequent sequence I think is very, very good. I don't necessarily know if the movie necessarily lost me or anything like that. I think my wife and I. Yeah.
My point is though that it starts with that moment. It moves into this crazy Busby Berkeley on steroids musical number, and I truly think that for the people who saw it at the time, like tiny little Elliot who was lost and totally alone in a movie theater, that it left everybody kind of going, what? This is not an Indiana Jones movie, and what am I seeing? And I think that kind of subversion of expectations really is to, in my view, is to the film's credit.
I can see that. I think also the frame of watching the movie changes if you think of it as the short round story. That if you reframe it as Ke Quan is the actual protagonist, then I think if you see everything as this is being retold by a 45-year-old short round and describing this series of events to his children or something like that, then suddenly the movie comes into clearer focus.
I would say, but before we get too far into that, and speaking about subverting expectations, why don't we get into the custom cocktail for tonight's show? As we do in every episode, Tom creates a themed drink that shares some element from the film that we're talking about. And I'm going to pull this up here. It's called The Blood and Bubbles. Tom, what was the inspiration behind this particular drink?
Well, I looked at that opening sequence and I saw the toast to Nurhachi. He's drinking champagne, and he's drinking it in kind of like a champagne goblet, a coupe, like I have in my house, rather than a flute, which was kind of the typical for the 1920s and 30s. And there is a lot of significantly more gore in this movie, so kind of tried to thought of, well, let's do something red but with champagne. We'll do a champagne cocktails were very, very popular in the first half of the 20th century and into the 19th century, and it involves supplementing the champagne with a little sweetener, with some extra booze, with some bitterness, or with so a classic champagne cocktail would be to use cognac and sugar and Angostura bitters, sort of like an old fashioned. And this way, I try to get a little more red in there by going kind of in the Sazerac direction of using whiskey, because I figured Indy would prefer whiskey, and then Peychaud's bitters, which are more bright and red. And I think as the sugar cube in mine is dissolving, it gets consistently sweeter toward the end. And if you're trying to make this at home, I would say definitely use a more drier champagne rather than an Asti or something like that, something that's sweeter. So it's fairly straightforward and conventional. I tried to make something that everyone could make at home instead of my usual grocery list of ingredients.
We appreciated that. Yes.
So I think is Dave drinking it, or is Dave drinking the one from Ant-Man?
I'm drinking last week's Ant-Man one, which I multiple times, as Elliot can attest, forgot in our mini fridge at work. And I was like, damn, I'm going to remember it this time. So I'll do a belated review of the Ant-Man one. It's really good.
Are you drinking John's as well?
No, John's is still there. I wouldn't drink John's. I just got to figure out a time that we can connect at some point downtown.
So yes, if you go to Review Cocktails or the Top Men Indie Podcast Instagram pages, you can see a picture of the Blood and Bubbles as created by our own Tom Jetner. And you'll have an image as well as the recipe on how to make your own custom cocktail at home. Are you John Singh? I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to say last name so we don't confuse. Are you much of a drinker, John?
I am not, actually. So.
That's fine. No, that's fine. But I'm thinking we're gonna do probably for if we talk about young Indiana Jones, we'll make a kiddie cocktail. You know, we'll do
well, so you could make one on our short round too. Although I have a feeling short round would just like Coke straight up, because he's just like an American. He loves America.
He wants this. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's go a little bit deeper into things here as we talk about the film. Normally, John has a feature where he talks about the toys of Indiana Jones.
There were toys, and I've never had one in my hands. After the failure of Kenner's Indiana Jones line, which only ran about a year, they didn't really want it back. And the Return of the Jedi had already finished, so they didn't really see a future with Lucasfilm going forward. As we'll talk about with the next two films, those lines are really to kind of keep Lucasfilm happy by the companies that already have Star Wars. This was given to LJN, who was a company in the 70s and 80s, disappeared by the 90s, but they were not known for action figures. They had done the E.T. line, which you might remember was just an E.T. and his neck could go up. That was about the most engineering they did for action figures. But they only produced 3 figures in the line, which is very, very rare. Even Ertl did a Star Trek 3 line that had 4. Like, it was so rare to only have 3, but there's an Indy there with a full jacket, so not the iconic look from this movie. There's a Molaram and a short round. They didn't even bother making Willie. And they were in a scale almost nothing else was in. It was close to the big rubbery wrestling figures of the 80s, which LJN also did. Now, of course, they're about $200 a pop, and they're awful. They're bad toys, bad articulation. They look slapdash. Indy has a removable hat, so good luck finding an Indy with a hat. But it's a lot more to talk about than the next film, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where there will be nothing. I will say there was a wave in the 2008 line that's is as hard to find as the LJN line was, because they were shutting down the Indiana Jones line. Those are the nicest sculpts. The Indiana Jones from that has great detail for a 3 3/4 figure. And they've just announced that in the new Hasbro Adventure Series, which are the Marvel Legends scale, like we talk about on MCU Review, there will be at least an Indiana Jones from the bridge, a possessed Indiana Jones, and a short round in that line, because luckily they're going back and covering every movie.
I actually have a couple Indiana Jones collectibles. I have the original Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom video game from Nintendo, the 8-bit version. I've held on to this baby for a very long time.
Elliot, when did that come out? Because 84 is still Atari. We're not in Nintendo yet.
Oh, this would come out about, I want to say, a year later. Because remember, there was an arcade version as well. This is a port over of the arcade.
I remember the arcade version. Yeah. You will walk from here. Yeah.
So this is like a scaled down version of the arcade, which is, again, I want to say the only Indiana Jones movie that would be turned into an arcade game outside of the pinball adventure. And then, yes, I do have the Temple of Doom lunchbox.
Is that an original or a reissue?
No, this is an original. You can tell it's kind of rusty, kind of scuffed up, but this is a vintage Temple of Doom lunchbox, which is among my most prized.
Can you bring that front closer, Elliot? It looks like his head is just like pasted on the other side.
Here? Yeah.
Looks like a really bad Photoshop from afar.
Yeah, not Photoshop. This is days of airbrushing.
Yeah. Well, again, it's him in front of the logo.
John, I'm really curious. That summer you mentioned they did Star Trek 3. Is that right? They did 4 toys.
Well, they did figure. Yeah, there was another line I never saw in retail, but later in the 80s, I found them at a comic convention. They did G.I. Joe Star Trek figures. And they did Kirk, Spock, and Scotty all in the red uniforms, and then they did Kruge, so they had a Klingon. So they were G.I. Joe scale. So you could use that. So I picked them up for like $2 a piece, and I think at this point it was like 87. But I just had them so I would have them in that scale. There were some lines in the 80s, as big as action figures were, that there were some lines that just completely slipped under the radar. And both.
Well, I'm curious about the other films. The other big films that summer, like Gremlins and Ghostbusters, also didn't really do that great on a toy line front.
No, Ghostbusters didn't really do anything because it was a comedy, so they didn't really see the marketing potential when it came out. And Gremlins, there were some toys. There was like almost like a Funko Pop gizmo, and then there was a Bendy stripe, and then I also remember those really disgusting those like jujubes that you put water on, and then they're supposed to grow big, and then they just get like slimy. They made those for Gremlins, but not for Indiana Jones. And I'm gonna guess, this is a complete stab in the dark, I'm gonna guess they all had color forms.
Yeah, but you didn't really see not to get off track, but you didn't really see Billy Peltzer action figures or Kate action figures or something, completely.
Yeah, no, it was just Mogwai and Gremlins.
Yeah.
On the comment line, Gary Smith, who actually Gary and I actually went to high school together back in those days, and he comments, I wasted thousands of quarters on that Temple of Doom arcade game. Gary, I think you and I were in the arcade together. I watched you waste a lot of quarters on that game. Thank you so much for chiming in and for watching. Susan says, as far as Gremlins, hey, how about get a Gizmo stuffed animal? There was the Gizmo's still out there. I think they've had Gremlins marketing for a bit. And what were those?
A lot of Gremlins stuff. The guys who make Alien and Predator. So there's always something on, and they're big and plush.
Those talking critters was Furbies. Were they called Furbies?
Furby.
They looked like Gremlins on their own, but then they made a Gremlins line. They looked like Mogwai and all that. I remember seeing those too. All right, I'm going to ask you, John Singh, this question, and I'm not. I don't know. You work for Lucasfilm, so maybe you can answer this deep cut of a nerd question from me. The diamond in the beginning of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom that Indy is seeking in exchange for the ashes of Nurhachi, right? Is that the same diamond that young Indiana Jones is going after in Treasure of the Peacock's Eye? Yes or no? You're the final verdict on this.
I'm going to give you the answer, not to name drop, but I'm going to give you the answer George Lucas used to give people when they would ask him questions like that.
Yeah?
I haven't the slightest idea.
Thank you. I laid it up. You slammed it in.
Wow. I thought I went deep. One of the things I worked on was a whole like trivia, a whole package of material leading into Kingdom of the Crystal Skull to reintroduce, Indiana Jones to audiences and to fans and to media. And I don't think that question ever came up. So.
Well, you heard it here first.
But that does lead to one of the points that Tom made earlier of the opening of Temple of Doom, which one of the things that's great about it is to your point, not wanting to make sure everybody understood that Karen Allen isn't in this film and this isn't the same movie, but that it really does feel, they have Wuhan in there in one scene, and you're talking about the diamond and the crystal and the diamond and the ashes and making this deal and doing this exchange and Lao Che, and you get this sense that there really was a whole story that led up to this scene, and this scene is the transition into this new story. And it's so well thought out, and yet on the other hand, it's kind of like just been thrown away.
Yeah, when Wuhan dies, I remember being sad, and then I watched it again. I'm like, he gets 2 lines. Like he's not even. There's no establishing shot for Wuhan. Indy just goes, "This is Wuhan," and then Wuhan dies, and I still felt bad. I felt like, oh, there were so many adventures for Indy and Wuhan.
But only 2 lines. But I'm telling you, some of the best lines. I mean, I'm telling you, if I'm going to die, I go, we've been on many adventures, but into the great unknown mystery, I go first. Oh, what? Oh, that is a great death line.
Is that what you want on your tombstone, Elliot, so everybody knows?
Yeah, I go into the great unknown mystery, I go first.
Well, that really works because anyone seeing that headstone will be not dead.
Right.
So you go first to anyone who sees it.
Also, Wuhan.
Actually, you know what? I never thought about this before, but it's a really wonderful kind of echo to Salah's line. I've never connected the two. Of you go first, I go first.
Mm-hmm. Asps, very dangerous. You go first. Yeah. But the actor who plays Wuhan will also that same year be in a James Bond movie with Roger Moore. We talked about it on Shaken Not Heard, didn't we, Dave?
Yeah. He plays the CIA character Chuck Lee in The View to a Kill. Actually came out in 85. This was 84, right?
A year later. But both movies were in production around the same time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So he's basically, I think they originally wanted Bond to meet up with Felix Leiter in Chinatown because there's this whole part of View to a Kill that's set in San Francisco. And then they decided, well, let's give him a contact there that's a little bit more tied to that actual region. So they came up with this Chinese CIA character of Chuck Lee, who's very likable in that. Unfortunately, he meets a pretty grisly demise, as many of Bond's contacts do. But he has quite a few more lines in that than he does in this movie.
But what a resume, you know?
Yeah.
You got the team up with James Bond and Indiana Jones like in successive years. I mean, I'm telling you that is saying something.
It's kind of like Karen Allen, because Karen Allen doesn't have a very long filmography, but it's Animal House, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Starman, Scrooge. It's you don't need a lot more than that.
There's also in that scene one of kind of my favorite character actors, Rick Young, is the I guess you could call him thug number 2 to the left of Lao Tse, who I think he has the wounded hand or something like that.
Mhm.
You know his face. It's like I've seen him in a bunch of movies. He's in 7 Years in Tibet. He was in The Last Emperor. He's in a few movies that I've liked over the years. Also, I love him in the audiobook version of World War Z. He does a reading for that, and he's just terrific. But he's just great. Has one of those character actor like faces of just like, and very good performer. So it was nice to see him in that. He's very young in this movie.
Elliot, can you repeat your question about the diamond? I just discovered something.
Ooh, okay.
Possibly.
So is the diamond from the beginning of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom the same diamond that young Indy went after in Treasure of the Peacock's Eye?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I did. That I don't know. I created this media kit in 2009, and it actually has a bit about the remains of Nurhaci down here, and it says only Lao Tse, having had dealings with Indiana Jones, hired Jones to secure the remains in exchange for a priceless diamond. So, I mean, is it possible? Sure, but I would think that, you know, probably we would know something about Lao Tse having met up with Indiana Jones at some point earlier in his life.
I often think that was just something that the writers of Young Indy came up with later.
Yeah,
you know, kind of like to fill in that gap. Like, what was this? Why did he have this thing for a diamond? This huge diamond in Temple of Doom. Hey, let's make it something that he went after when he was, you know, in his teens or in his early 20s.
Well, I did want to look that up and see if I could find it for you. So.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think, though, because you couldn't provide an answer, I believe you owe me a copy of that media kit now.
Okay.
There is some interesting there's some interesting history on the Nurhaci remains. It said first emperor of Manchu dynasty, which is not 100%. It was the immediate predecessor of the first Qing emperor of China. But given this is 1935, this is 4 years after the Japanese invasion of Manchuria, and the Japanese have installed the last Qing emperor Pu Yi as the emperor of their puppet state Manchukuo. So there's maybe a little more skullduggery. Maybe these guys are potentially Japanese agents that are acquiring this to bolster the legitimacy of the puppet state. Maybe they're representatives of the Kuomintang, who are, I believe, in control of Shanghai at this moment and trying to bolster background or trying to prevent it from falling in the wrong hands. So there's that. Artifact is a little more loaded given the context of 1935 than you might expect.
Well, I don't want to get too much into the history, because I know a lot of folks do give. They say they talk so much about how much Indy plays in history, and they try to make it historically accurate. And then, of course, the screenplay to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom would be written by the screenwriters on American Graffiti, Willard. I never pronounce his last name. I'm sorry?
Hike.
Willard Hike and Gloria Katz. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
And but I will say, because this movie really it embodies more of, again, the Republic serials, where things kind of, it's very obviously when they're in the jungle, it's obvious they're not really in the jungle, they're on a set. That whole bit with Willie Scott, running around and running into the different animals, but they're supposed to be in the jungles of India. There are no monitor lizards there. You're not going to find an owl, and they don't have giant vampire bats. In fact, there aren't giant vampire bats. Vampire bats.
That was something the second unit found.
Yes.
They just saw bats flying, and they were like, "Oh, well, just add in the line. They're giant vampire bats." It's like, these are fruit bats,
right? Which shows that to me, always went. Indy is even more questionable an animal expert than he is an architect, an archaeologist. Doesn't practice that,
or a pilot.
And I in my own head, I remember when I first saw it as a young man, I was like, oh, he's just saying that to freak Willie out. He's just saying that to freak her out. She's like city girl out in the sticks for the first time. He's just saying what he can to freak her out.
No, he has no idea how to fly that plane. And then the next film, which is set 5 years later, he tells his dad, "Fly, yes; land, no," because he flew that plane for about 10 seconds. That's the character arcs you get,
right? But that's also what I'm going to go back to my original kind of thesis statement, which is that's what I love about the movie is this is not a situation that Indiana Jones should be able to get out of. Right. There's no logical reason. There's no logical way that Indiana Jones can navigate his way out of this situation. But there's obviously there's no way that they could even get into the situation to begin with. So it's just so patently ridiculous that it all becomes fun. And I think that leads up to the mine car chase of, come on. I mean, this thing is out of control. This is just silly. But it's reveling in that silliness.
I agree, John, because I remember when I saw it in the theater that first time, and Willie and Shorty and Indy get in that mine car, and boom, they go, no, the left tunnel, Indy, left tunnel. And of course, Indy, thinking he knows what's best, does the opposite. He says, I'm going to take a shortcut, makes it worse. Every time Indy thinks he knows the right thing to do, he does the worst possible thing in that particular situation. But I remember in the theater when you have that first shot of the mine car going down like a roller coaster, and you hear Willie screams like when you hear someone typically screaming at a roller coaster. We all laughed in the theater. We all it was like, oh my God, it was exactly that. It's like, oh, now we're hitting another level here of just, it's thrilling, but it's also ridiculous. It's just so ridiculous.
Yeah, but John, being a publicity man, do you recall movies being described as roller coaster rides before Temple of Doom? Because they all are now.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure. I'm sure that moniker had been applied, but I think that it was the biggest criticism leveled against this film is that it feels kind of tailor-made to be some kind of theme park ride, right? And that it felt at the time. I mean, take yourself back 38 years ago. It felt so of its own thing, so completely different to everything else that had come before, even to Raiders of the Lost Ark, because it was pitched so high. It was just so loud and so kind of aggressively nonstop. I mean, Tom pointed out that it feels like there's a lull that takes place from the time they kind of get off the raft to the time they get attacked by the thuggies for the first time at Pancop Palace. I mean, that's 25 minutes. That's 25 minutes of stillness in an hour and 55-minute movie.
Yeah,
And
but it's all world building. So it's like Elliot was saying with the Republic serials, that's the episode where they explore the jungle because there's these mini adventures that happen to them. And
right, but even within that, as Elliot pointed out, it's Willie Scott screaming here and turning around, screaming there and screaming there and screaming there, and I mean, drove people nuts. I know that a lot of people just couldn't get past Willie Scott, but it's all just silliness, and that's one of the things I love.
I'm gonna defend the Willie Scott character here because I will admit, yes, she is different from Marion, but every one of the Indiana Jones films, the challenge there is coming up with a new dynamic between Indy and the female foil or companion or whatever. I know when they finally roll around to Last Crusade, you think that the Elsa character is going to be, she's blonde. You think, oh, it's another Willie, but she's more of a, maybe she won't scream so much, although she does a little bit in the beginning. They have to come up with a new take on each of the relationships. So I'll give it to that. Plus, Willie does come into her own by the end of the film. You see that character kind of like, kind of find her inner, that strength inside. And again, when I watch it, every time I watch it, the screaming Mimi aspect of her doesn't grate at me so much because I've heard it, and more of why she's playing that character that way comes forward. Because again, this is the first time we really see the sort of womanizing aspect of Indy. The dude is like, he's kind of a jerk towards women,
It's kind of a jerk towards everybody in this.
Well, yeah, he is. But I mean, this one is like, well, I'm allowing you to tag along. And then she comes back like, you haven't been able to keep your eyes off me since you entered my club. So they already set up that dynamic there.
Yeah, and the most self-serving seduction scene ever put on film.
Yes.
They literally, the two of them stand there and talk about themselves. Then they go to opposite rooms and are mad that person isn't talking about them.
There it is. And again, there's no action, but things just keep happening. If there isn't an action set piece, there's some sort of character building or comedy. That I will say the dialogue, even the stillness that you referred to, John, it doesn't feel still.
No,
and I always felt like something was happening,
No, I'm just saying, to Tom's point, there's that moment where Tom, you kind of described it as quieting down or slowing down, and it does a little bit, but if you go back and look at any film from the 70s or 80s, by today's standards, they are just, by today's standards, they are insanely slow. And here is a film that I think comes closer to maybe being that bridge between the way filmmaking was and the way what it became. And I also think there was a lot of that, what we now have of fan service with Marvel films and the films that you guys love to talk about. This was happening. This was the first time that I can remember that really happened. That people came to this movie kind of knowing what to expect, knowing in advance what some of the storylines were, knowing who some of the characters were. Other than the Star Wars films, this was the first film where people kind of anticipated it. And what's really amazing about that is in 1984, VHS didn't really exist. It was out there, but most of us didn't have it in our homes. If you saw Raiders of the Lost Ark more than once, you probably saw it on TV. And it was showing maybe once a year on network TV. So the idea that people came into this with a solid grasp of Indiana Jones lore was really a testament, I think, to what Steven Spielberg and George Lucas had created, and the desire to kind of have fans who really knew everything there was to know about it. When that in 1984, that required a lot of work.
I love your point, John, about how every film of that era will get slow in that second act. You immediately made me think of two films right before and right after that are known as some of the greatest action films ever. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. They get stranded on an asteroid, and they sit on the asteroid for a good 20 minutes eating apples. And Return of the Jedi, I always found had a much worse pacing than this. Return of the Jedi, like once they kill Jabba, that movie dies until the speeder bikes show up. And it's like 3 long scenes of exposition. There's the rebel briefing, there's Obi-Wan, there's like that movie sits still. And
well, we also meet the Emperor and kill Yoda in that.
Well, we don't kill Yoda. He passes away peacefully. but
the movie killed him.
There's smaller moments, but that is the formula of storytelling.
But to John's point, Tom, quietly. It happens quietly.
They killed him softly.
And look at Wrath of Khan. How many action films can you imagine would have a scene of 2 people talking about the need for reading glasses?
Yeah.
Okay, can I take a moment again? Young Elliot, when he saw Return of the Jedi, which I cried at the end. I cried in 2 places when Yoda dies, and I was even at that point going, "Oh my God, I'm crying at the death of a Muppet." And then, of course, at the very end, when Luke sees his father and Obi-Wan and Yoda as in the Force, I'm like, so it hit me here. Maybe I'm if today's world is too cynical for stuff like that.
But I want to pull it back to Temple of Doom, because while all those things happen, and you can talk about all the touch points that kind of came to a culmination in Return of the Jedi. In Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, arguably the biggest sequel up until that point outside of Star Wars, here's a film that basically says, forget about everything else you saw. We're not even going to worry about you knowing anything about Indiana Jones. I don't even know if at this point he teaches, because it's a couple of years before Raiders. He appears in a tweed suit with glasses at Hancock Palace, but
he acts like a professor, but he immediately gets into fights with everybody.
Yeah, but is he? And have we? Do we care? And
he does say he's a professor and has to return to his universe. He says that, but you're right. We're not sure if he's actually teaching. He could be just like hanging out,
But I guess my point is, though, that it's just all of those character kinds of moments that make you go awe, or make you have some kind of more emotional response are non-existent in this film. It's just kind of an exercise in fun. Yeah, go ahead, Elliot.
One moment though, to not to contradict you, but the one when the children are reunited with their parents at the end, and you see the little girl with the gap teeth, Spielberg picked her out of the group and said, "Okay, we're going to use you. We're going to do this bit where make sure you turn towards the camera, make sure you smile big so you can see that you lost your 2 front teeth there." That little girl was probably worried, "I'm not going to be in the movie because I suddenly lost my teeth." And Spielberg went, "No, you're it. You're going to have a moment to shine because you have that look I'm going for." And I tell you, and I just watched the movie. That scene chokes me up. Every time.
There's one thing we've learned from Schindler's List is Spielberg knows how to find one girl in a shot.
Oh, whoa!
Well, the village scenes are interesting because I feel like Spielberg treats the Shankara stones with more, or has Indy treat the Shankara stones with more reverence than Indy treated the Ark of the Covenant. As a positive, I think in this movie is they do manage to kind of hype up I don't want to say MacGuffin, but I can't think of another word to describe it, but in terms of hyping it up. So when you see it, even though that it's a rock, you immediately have a sense of there's a weight, there's a heft behind it.
There's a weight, but at the same time, it can't, like when we talk what Marcus says in Raiders, he goes, when he refers to the Ark, it's not like anything you've ever gone after before. So Temple of Doom has to kind of walk that balance. Okay, we need to have something significant here, but it can't be something that it's in grander scope than, let's say, the Ark of the Covenant, which can lay waste to mountains and so on. This is a rock that even in the beginning, Indy's like, it's not that to him it's not that they lost the rock, it's that their kids got kidnapped.
Yeah, and that's so to get back to the previous point, just to tie it together, is that it's not that there isn't any emotion in the film. It's that those emotional moments don't require you to have had experience with the character before. But I think that is something that the more I watch the film, the more it kind of impacts me, that the reason that Indiana Jones is doing this, is kind of tied into Short Round, and the idea that Short Round kind of came to him because his parents died and he was out on the streets, and here's this ragamuffin kid that got hooked up with Indiana Jones. Indy has a soft spot for kids, and that's something that never gets exploited again, really, in the movies. Maybe they will this time around, but
that's right. That's it. As every film has Indy with of course, the female counter, the female, whether love interest or foil or whatever. Then there's a sidekick. So in Raiders, Sala is his sidekick. In Temple of Doom, it'll be Short Round. In Last Crusade, it'll be his father, Henry Sr. And then you'll have Mac in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
The sidekick always wears a hat.
Well, yeah, you have Shia LaBeouf in Crystal Skull. Mac turns.
Oh, that too, yeah. He wears a hat in the beginning.
Mac is Satipo. Mac's Alfred Molina in Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
So,
but none of them had that really sweet vintage New York Giants cap that Mr. Round has.
Yeah.
That hat actually lives up to Indy's hat.
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
Oh, that scene when Indy he's rescued Willie. He's Short Round has gotten him free of the curse of the blood of Kali. When they give each other their hats, he puts Short Round's hat on Shorty's head, and then Shorty hands him his hat. Again, right here, man, gets me right here. I'm like, oh, but absolutely right, John. That Harrison Ford. Now we're going to see this later on. He, in his career, in any other movie he does, he is incredible with younger actors. You'll see him later on. Hell, he's doing it now in that show Shrinking.
When you're Harrison Ford's age, everyone is a younger actor.
Well, yes, but
unless you're acting opposite Patrick Stewart.
But it seems like these young actors are incredibly comfortable with him. If I were doing a scene with Harrison Ford, I'd be like, "Holy crap, it's Harrison freaking Ford."
They say they all do that for their first take.
I bet.
And it's like, I can't get through my day if this is how I'm going to be.
All right. Real quick, because John, you threw this out in the beginning. If you could have the physique of Harrison Ford in any of the movies, which one would it be? I'm telling you, Temple of Doom. I would love Harrison Ford bod from Temple of Doom. That kind of, he was bulkier than in Raiders. In Raiders, he's much leaner. You can tell he's got a lot more muscle in this one.
Yeah, well, in this one, he knew he was going to have to be half topless in the end. And also, this is the same year as The Terminator. Rambo was 1 year later. Action stars are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time Last Crusade comes around, and he's an older actor, he doesn't have to play that game anymore. But yeah, this is the most physical he looks in any of the films.
By the time Last Crusade comes out, and then you have Michael Keaton as Batman.
Yeah, and nobody had to work out anymore. And he wears a tie in that movie.
Which is ironically of all the Indy outfits, the Last Crusade outfit is my favorite. That one is my favorite.
Did you see? I don't know. We spoke on this in the air. Did you see the Kenner is quote unquote reissuing a Last Crusade Indy that looks like the Raiders Indy, but he has a tie?
Yeah, I saw that one. Yeah, I also saw the Temple of Doom one from the end. It's like, no, that's not working. That's not working for me.
But it looks like how Kenner would have made him in '84
back then.
Which isn't great.
Yeah. Which physique would you want, Tom?
I'm mute,
So,
Tom. There you go.
thank you. I'd probably have to go with Raiders of the Lost Ark. I feel, I don't know. I miss being that slender.
I was that slender in high school. That was it. And then my metabolism slowed down, and next thing you know, whoop. I'm more Sala, Raiders Sala. No, Last Crusade Sala. That's me. It's more what I am right now.
Well, Dial of Destiny Sala is a very skinny Sala, so you got that to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, when I hit, 70, something like that. All right. We're hitting over an hour here, and I do not want to take advantage of our special guest time. Why don't we go into our home stretch here and talk about what are things that we haven't been able to offer so far yet about our experience with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. John Singh.
I like I said, I got to work on Crystal Skull, and when we were doing that, I got to hear a lot of conversations about the three films. I also, one of the very first things I ever worked on when I was at Lucasfilm, the first week that I got to Lucasfilm, they told me, "Oh yeah, we're gonna put out Indiana Jones in the DVD box set," and that was back when kind of digital remastering and digital restoration was still fairly new. There was a wonderful guy here in Burbank named John Lowry who handled the restorations of the films, and so I got to actually hear discussions about these films, and routinely you would hear George and Steven Spielberg saying that they were personally in very dark places when they wrote Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and that now they regret that. They wish that a film hadn't turned out so dark. They wish it wasn't so mean spirited. They wish it wasn't so difficult to watch. And I just think I want to come to the defense of this film and say that's why it works. You can't have light without dark, and the reason it works is because it goes to these really, really, really scary, difficult places. This isn't Indiana Jones and the Temple of kind of fun. This is the Temple of Doom. Originally, I guess the Temple of Death was the original working title, and it goes there, and it takes a kid there. And it exposes you to some things that on a big meta level are going to be things that kids have to experience in life. Why did my parent change? Why are they different? Why are they going through these dark, ugly places? Am I ever going to get my parent back? These are real things, depicted in a fun sort of way. And I think that the film doesn't really get credit for that. And I think it's just my own point of view, but I'm kind of over the whole Indiana Jones fighting Nazis thing. And now we're going to have our third film with that. And here's a film that with Temple of Doom that just absolutely gloriously, happily, unashamedly goes in its own totally different way. And I think for that, it's something that I just really love it.
I'm going to have to agree with you on that, John, in every way, because, exactly. And the whole bit, there is so much symbolism there, especially when you see the bit when the children are escaping from the catacombs through the dining area of the Maharaja. So you have that symbolism of the people rising up against, the aristocracy, the ruling class, and it's like, and now if people are like, oh, how can they show that? Well, let's think about kids pretty much being used as slave labor to make our iPhones.
Also, the movie was roundly criticized for its kind of immature, simplistic vision of kind of colonial India, and India didn't want them to film it in India. They rejected the movie, and here's this moment, very RRR, of, you know, at the end, of the kids running through and kind of destroying the palace, destroying this symbol of colonialism, because they're freed. They were taken away and they're freed, and now the village is going to grow, and the village can rise up and reclaim itself. I think it's great. And the other thing we didn't talk about real quickly is the John Williams score, which I think is probably in my view, one of his absolute best scores.
And it was a shame that for the longest time you couldn't find it. That score, you could find the Raiders score, you could find the Last Crusade score. The Temple of Doom score used to be the most difficult one to find, because once it was out of print, it took forever. And then, of course, they did a special reissue of all the scores, and it's easier to find out. But I remember like going crazy, I don't know how many different comic conventions, record stores, dealers, online. Well, this was before you could have online dealers, but you know, even later on when there were online dealers, man, trying to find that full score was impossible. Yeah,
it's a great score.
It is. Real quick in the comments, the hearkening back to talking about the diamond. Susan offered, by the way, guys, diamonds are forever. Maybe the diamond in the beginning of Temple of Doom was really meant to be a nod towards diamonds are forever. You know? Maybe. And Gary again chimes in Temple of Doom. Yeah, Ford channels his inner Doc Samson in Temple of Doom, or Doc Savage. He actually looks a lot like the cover of a Doc Savage pulp magazine. Tom, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to offer?
Yeah. Just a note on the rejection of colonialism. They're rescued by the British Army.
They're rescued by Indiana Jones, and I mean, yes, that's true. But the British Army comes against the Thuggees, who are the ultimate bad guys in this story.
Right.
And I mean, it's Gunga Din, but I mean, it's the kids. The kids are freed. The kids are rescued.
Yes. I think that, oh boy, there was an area that we were going to talk about that I was going to talk about that. It slipped my attention.
I'll assume based on that one comment that nothing I said swayed you.
Well,
man, Tom, you definitely want to throw us out of a plane without parachutes on this.
No, I don't.
You're like, I'm pulling the cord on that raft.
No, it's very much. I think describing it as like a Doc Samson serial is perfect. It plays off of a lot of the old serial tropes, and if you're just gonna roll with that, that's fine. I have no problem against it. They do the spiked walls closing together.
Oh, another
I remember there's an old Venture Brothers bit from like maybe 15, 16 years ago where they said, well, how fast are they moving? It's like faster than haunted house spike walls, but not as fast as creepy scientist spike walls. So, but that's a good sequence. There's a lot of like the whole mine car chase. That's very classic. It's playing into a lot of the type of classic stuff that you'd seen like 30 years ago, and not 30 years ago. Prior to this movie, that would have been 30 years or 40 years prior to this movie. So if you're cool with that, then that's then that's great. I'm not gonna hark on anyone for liking a movie, just because it's at the bottom of my personal Indiana Jones hierarchy. Just because I think when we get into it, I love Last Crusade, and we'll probably talk about that when we get into this.
I thought you were going to say when we get into it, I love Crystal Skull.
Yeah. Crystal Skull's grown on me over the years. So if this is kind of the bottom of my power rankings in an otherwise excellent series, then there's nothing wrong with that.
All right. Well, I guess we got that little bit of sunshine.
Let me just add two quick things. The physicality of this movie, Crystal Skull. I mean, there's a movie overloaded with CG, right? That is just every possible thing they could do, they do because they can do it because it's CG.
Right, and the stunts in this one are great, and they are for the most part. They're all
they have stop motion sequences and little puppets and stuff like that. That was one of the things we got to see at the archives, was one of the cars with the puppets in it and stuff like that. But that all had to be kind of physically created. The other thing that's really an interesting side note is that the
giant Kali like sitting in like a box in the archives at Lucasfilm or something, like fully constructed. It just takes up all, like you go randomly open a door and it's just standing there.
The guy in the cage is in there. The heart guy in the cage. The airstrip scene where they take off, where Dan Aykroyd is in this one, where they get into Lao Che's airplane, was actually shot at an airstrip called Hamilton Field in Marin County, probably it's just down the street, literally, from Skywalker Ranch. And when I first worked at Lucasfilm, that was where I bought my house. They had developed it into a residential area, and I had no idea. None of us really realized, put the two together, that this was, and they have these huge old hangars. And so you can see those hangars in this movie, and that's now kind of a residential area right at the end of Lucas Valley Road. Yeah.
Wow. Man, that's wow. There were a bunch of parts that came up. I'm gonna let Dave though go, because I can easily just take over at this point. Tom's got me going.
Oh God, I've kicked the hornet's nest on this.
Dave, the one comment I was going to make earlier is, and John Singh kind of touched on it, was that the fact that Lucas and Spielberg were both had gone through very recently some kind of bitter breakups, and that sort of fueled the sort of angry energy that this movie has at times. And John Clark made the observation that means that Temple of Doom is the Pinkerton to Raiders of the Lost Ark's Blue Album. Is that not correct?
Yeah, I feel like ripping a man's heart out of his body and showing it to him and then dipping him into lava. That's Spielberg's Tired of Sex.
The bitter, arguably misogynistic follow-up to a universally loved first entry in a series.
Yeah,
it makes perfect sense.
Gonna find out who the hardcore fans are.
And that would be me, my friends, because I'll tell you too. I remember when Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was first released. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert both unanimously gave the movie 4 stars and said that it was one of those rare sequels that was as good, if not better, than the movie that preceded it. And I remember when I went to go see it, I had no complaints. I remember going, how difficult it is to make a sequel that just holds up. How many bad sequels do we see? Just outright bad, that it doesn't know the characters, it doesn't work for one reason or another. This is Spielberg. Yes, it's dark, but the dude is still, again, one of the great American filmmakers. That scene in the beginning with the diamond and the exchange and the things going back and forth on that little lazy Susan on the table, that Spielberg is able to keep track of all those things going on, that complex.
And then the balloons and the ice. Yeah.
And you never have a problem following any of it. When that one bit when the diamonds go skittering across the dance floor, and Kate Capshaw, Willie's trying to get it, and it keeps getting kicked out of her reach, and Indy is trying to get the bottle of antidote. It keeps always out of his reach. And then the big bucket of ice comes along and swallows up the diamond. Everyone in the theater went, "Oh!" at that. That is
Absolutely, and that's pure filmmaking, because
Yes.
at that point you have there's been no interaction with the characters, no character kind of establishing stuff. It's just Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones saying, "Where's the antidote?" and
Yep.
and Willie Scott saying, "Where's the diamond?" and everybody's laughing and they're going with it, and they're totally into it and have no idea why, right?
Exactly. No, I agree. So to me, it's the whole. And I just love this movie too. Raiders, I love Raiders. I love Temple. I love Last Crusade. I like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull very, very much. Although when we get to that, there's a hell of a lot of DNA from Temple of Doom in Crystal Skull. You go in, you go, holy crap! That as I've been rewatching everything, wow, this feels like a very Temple of Doom bit. This feels like Raiders DNA. This feels like some Last Crusade stuff. You can tell that by that point they're pulling everything from the previous movies and putting it into this new stew. But just focusing on Temple of Doom, you're going to see a lot of stuff that boom. J.J. Abrams, I'm convinced he aped the tone and the way of moving action along from Temple of Doom. He aped it for The Force Awakens, because when I think of The Force Awakens, I go, that feels like Spielberg from that movie right there. So you'll see.
One of the amazing things that you just can't do today is these gigantic sets, but also the lighting and they replicate these in CG, and so they look kind of like vaguely they look like that, but there's something to the physicality and the tactile quality of having these crazily colored and lit scenes with in real locations that this movie arguably is kind of the zenith of, I think.
I agree. No, it's just incredible.
And then the other thing that you made me think of is that when Spielberg made West Side Story, he talked a lot about how he's always wanted to make a musical, and I just kind of wanted to keep saying, like, you made a music, you made a fantastic musical sequence, and this is the movie that I could see the kid from The Fabelmans actually directing.
Yep. Well, I remember when Temple of Doom came out, that's what he said in the very beginning. Everyone said, "Why is there this big musical sequence in the beginning?" He goes, "I've always wanted to do a musical," So when he finally does West Side Story, I'm going, okay, you needed to do like the whole deal. So I won't progress. Hey, he's Steven Spielberg. I mean, yes, I was a tad annoyed that West Side Story was what kept him from doing Indy 5. At the same time, James Mangold, I'm sure, is going to do an incredible job on Indy 5, or we'll see. I trust it. John, closing thoughts?
Quite an intro. Long sigh. I want to go back to something John said in the beginning about how this movie didn't give you what you expected. And I saw this movie on my 12th birthday, and it was the first birthday I could bring friends to the movies, and multiplexes were new, and it was a big, big deal. And that poster is probably burned into my brain more than any single image of the film. And walking out of it, we all really, really loved it, but we only talked about moments. And granted, we're kids and they're big set pieces, but that's always what I come back to with this movie is it's a movie of moments. There's like, as we said a number of times, there's like the jumping out of the airplane with the rats is a cool moment. The room with the spikes in it. As a 12-year-old, I went, finally, like we've gone a movie and a half without Indiana Jones being in a room with giant spikes in it. There's so many set pieces, a lot of them which were supposed to be in Raiders that they didn't have the time and the budget to do. But I feel like Temple of Doom is always a big bag of moments, and there's like there's things that don't quite line up with each other. There's a lot of fun things, that there's monkey brains on one hand, and there's diamonds and antidotes in another. There's a lot of things that don't quite go up to a whole. And the quote I always think about that George Lucas said about this movie was, he said, we didn't intend for it to be that dark. It's just you put in a light thing and you put in a dark thing, you put in a light thing and put in a dark thing. And in the edit, you go, hey, we're losing a lot of the light things. And I do feel like that there's a lot of things in this, and they can be incredibly different tones. Like the seduction scene between Indy and Willie is like nothing else in that movie. It's like, we've mentioned many times, it's like, oh, Spielberg wanted to direct a musical, so we gave him 5 minutes to do that. It looks like he wants to direct a Preston Sturges movie, so they give him 5 minutes to do that. There, as any sequel to a major hit, it's a little indulgent in that. But there are a lot of moments I like, and there are moments that just bother me. So it's not my favorite. And I may say this on every podcast, but I always say Raiders of the Lost Ark, in my mind, is the most perfect movie ever made. And the reason it is because it has just enough of every genre that it's this perfect balance. You have every movie genre there is in that. And each one of the sequels, in an attempt to outdo that, has always put too many on one side and it started lopsided. And this is like the horror movie of Indiana Jones. And as we're going to see with Last Crusade, the Last Crusade will be the comedy of Indiana Jones. So depending on what mood I'm in, I can go for this, or it can repel me as much as it draws me in over the last 40 years.
And let's remember that John Clark right now is in a really bad mood from a bad move. So,
well, are you dismissing my opinion?
No, you just said it yourself.
It's a great movie. You're mean. Sit down. You don't like nice things.
This is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, but he can just as easily quote. You just quoted Siskel and Ebert, so just give him the Siskel and Ebert line.
Yeah,
well, you're wrong.
Yeah,
yeah.
There we go.
And where are both those guys now?
Ow!
First, they've gone first into the great
into the great unknown mystery. Yep.
I hope on their headstones one has the thumbs up and one has the thumbs down, and I don't want to know which.
But see, that was the thing too. I remember Siskel was always he hated everything. So this was one of those rare times when they both liked the same thing. It was kind of rare. All right. Hey, everyone. Audrey, thanks for checking in for a bit. And Audrey says she can only hang out for a bit. We'll catch the rest on replay. Thanks for that. Lehman, thank you as always for tuning in. Gary, Susan, for everyone who's been watching us on the live stream on our Facebook, on the Top Men and Indiana Jones Podcast Facebook page, as well as on the MCU Review YouTube page. We really do appreciate if you've been enjoying the conversation, if you've been enjoying the show. We have archives of all previous episodes on the Facebook and YouTube pages. Please give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a heart, subscribe and share where you can, and let us know, what you think. And always feel free to join in on the conversation. You can, I see all comments as posted on the pages. If you are listening to this show as part of the audio podcast, Caffeinated Comics, thank you. You are all, please let us know what you think by commenting on any of the individual pages, including the Caffeinated Comics Facebook page, where you find all the news that's fit to geek. John posts all this stuff in comics and pop culture. I try to post as much relevant Indiana Jones information as I can on the Indy podcast page. And John Singh will be returning in a few episodes to talk about Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So before we go, we'll go around the board and share where people can find us on social media, what we're up to, where can we see you next? John Singh.
Theoretically, I'm at JJ Singh on Twitter, but I haven't actually been on Twitter.
You know what? Twitter, the Twitterverse is a dumpster fire.
I haven't looked at any of the other ones. I'm on Facebook. Feel free to look me up. I'm on Instagram. I never look at. I mean, it's just, so anyway, you can find me.
Plus, your PR company.
Oh yeah, J2 Communications is the company I started after I left Lucasfilm. So got to work with all sorts of things. Yeah, it's J2COMM.com. You can find me there.
Tom Jettner.
You can find the Blood and Bubbles and all of the cocktails for this show and for the MCU review and all the subsequent episodes, assuming Elliot doesn't kill me before the end of the series.
I don't know. Yeah, we're gonna have to have a talk.
Being called into the manager's office after this episode. So I got to make the next one real good. At REVU Cocktails on the Instagram app.
Folks, I just want to assure you, Tom Jettner will be back on the next episode.
Oh, that's it. You have to have the little stinger at the end, like
little stinger.
Indiana Jones will return. It's like Tom Jettner will return.
Yeah, Tom Jettner died on his way home to his planet, on his way to his home planet. Dave.
You can follow me on Instagram at Pinto_Noir.
Why would we do that?
Most of what I post is animal related. Cute animal related, and usually my dog or sometimes my cat. So,
and folks, just so you know, you do want to follow John Singh for his dog Walter, who is the handsomest fella you're ever gonna see.
He is on Instagram at a dog called Walter.
A dog called Walter. You want to follow a dog called Walter, a handsome man. Wonderful story. I think, John, I became an even bigger fan of yours. After, of course, your previous dog and the adventures that we had. We'll talk about him next time. I want to, that'd be great. John Clark.
You can follow me on Instagram at Not In My Book. There's actually a picture of the 2008 Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom action figure. I had to rebuy it because when I was going through my collection, he had somehow slipped away. But if you are not listening to the audio version of this podcast, if you're watching it on YouTube now, you can listen to all of the episodes on the Caffeinated Comics podcast, celebrating 10 years of podcasting. We had a really great episode a couple weeks ago with Wally Podrazik and Harry Castleman, the authors of Watching TV, on whether or not we have passed the golden age of streaming and why.
That was a really good episode. That was a really good episode.
It was a great conversation, and they brought up a lot of things that I had never considered, which made perfect sense now. So if you want to go back to the audio-only feed, that's a great episode to start with.
And we just, I know we just posted the Ant-Man and the Wasp MCU review. The next MCU review will be talking about Captain Marvel. We'll be joined by Peabody Award winner and editor-in-chief of Deadspin, Julie DeCaro. She's going to be joining us for that. And, of course, you can follow me on all the socials at Elliot Serrano with 2 L's, 2 T's, and 2 R's. Please follow and subscribe to the MCU Review YouTube page. Give us a like. Check out Caffeinated Comics. Give us a review wherever you listen to your podcast, because all you have to do is ask your smart speaker to play Caffeinated Comics, and there we will be. And, of course, Top Man and Indiana Jones podcast you can find on Facebook.
Hey, John and Elliot, before we go, you just mentioned Elliot. You just mentioned, John, the kind of this podcast you did about streaming and about kind of where we are in streaming. One thing that's really underrated and really under remarked upon with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is that it literally changed the entire film industry by forcing the hand of the PG-13 rating,
which now every blockbuster has to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the 1-2 punch of this and Gremlins, which came out within 2 weeks of each other.
And in one form or another.
Yeah, they were the straws that broke the camel's back of the MPAA, and they made them institute the PG-13. And Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom plays a really important role in film history for that reason.
Red Dawn also would right after that. Yeah, so it would be Indy, Gremlins, Red Dawn. That would just, that domino would just, go from there. Thanks for bringing that up, John. That is a really significant thing. And another reason why the movie's great, and anyone who doesn't think that probably needs to find another podcast to guest on. Narrator, he found another podcast. All right, folks, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you, John Singh, for joining us. Thank you all for watching. If you're watching us live, you're watching the video archive. If you're listening to us on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network, thank you so much for being a part of this experience. We'll see you next time when the next Top Men will be talking about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Until next time, be good, be safe, and remember, it's all about fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory.